Good morning, students. Once again, welcome to the live virtual classes from ICAI. And today we are going to continue with the process costing in the cost and management accounting. So we have started last session with process accounts, where we have learned how to prepare the process accounts, and we have also learned how to prepare the normal loss, and abnormal gain account. So just a quick recap of whatever we have done in the last session. Remember, we talked about process costing. Here, the input of the raw material enters into the first process, and from process 1, the output of process 1 will move to process 2, which will be used as input for process 2. So the output of process 1 becomes input for process 2. Similarly, the output for process 2 will become the input for process 3. There can be a number of processes, and once we reach the last process, the output of the last process moves to the finished product or finished goods account. Each process or stage gives an output which is used as input for the subsequent process. The sequence of process will remain same. So you cannot do process 3 first and then process 1. Process 1, then process 2, and then process 3. The total number of processes can vary. It can be 2, 3, 4, any. And subsequently, the final product is produced. Important thing is, whenever we have given an output in a process, it is assumed that the entire output has moved on to the next process. So until and unless is specifically mentioned, we do not keep the closing stocks of finished output in any process. The elements of cost which are used to do a process in any process account, like process 1 or 2, the elements are material, labor, and they can be direct expenses as well as overheads. Overheads can again be direct, which is attributable to a particular process, or they can also be indirect. So if they are indirect overheads, which cannot be traced specifically to a particular process, but they are part of the production, they should also be allocated to the various processes. So these are the production overheads, which are direct, which will move to the process, and indirect overheads, which will be allocated amongst the various processes. In what ratio we will distribute the indirect overheads to various processes will depend on the question and depend upon the circumstances. So if there is a mention of specific ratio or specific base on which the indirect overheads are to be allocated, we will allocate them in that ratio only, or on taking that element of cost as the base. However, if nothing is mentioned, we generally will take labor or wages as the basis in which we'll divide the indirect overheads. Then there is abnormal loss, normal loss, and abnormal effectiveness or gain. So the output or the crux here is that if there are certain number of units which are input in a process, then there is always an estimation of what could be the percentage normal loss, which is based on past experience and industry standards. So basis that if there is 100 units which is put in a process 1, and if there is a normal loss expected to be 5%, then we expect 95 units to be as output of process 1, which will then move to process 2. Now, if you have anything less than 95, that becomes abnormal loss. But if you have anything above 95, that becomes abnormal gain or effectiveness. So out of 100 units, 5 units are expected to be normal loss. So the output is expected to be 95. Anything less than 95, let's say 85, then you have an abnormal loss of 10 units. Anything above 95 to 100, let's say 97, which means there is an abnormal gain of 2 units. This abnormal loss or the lost units may be collected as scrap, and maybe they have a resale value. If they are non-collectible, they will be waste. But if they can be collected and can be sold, have scrap, they may have some value. So this realizable value of normal loss is very important. Rather, the realizable value of scrap or the loss is very important. We cannot say that only normal loss will be sold, the abnormal loss will also be sold. So if there are 100 units as input, 85 is produced, 15 units of scrap may be sold. If there are 100 units, 95 is produced, 97 is produced, only 3 units of scrap can be sold. The cost of normal loss is to be borne by the good units. So this is the most important rule here. The total cost less any scrap realized from the sale of normal loss divide by total units minus normal loss units. This becomes the base rule or the base price for our units which gets transferred to the next process, and also for the cost of abnormal loss or abnormal gain. This abnormal loss or gain calculated at the standard rate of normal loss after deducting the normal loss is goes to costing P&L account. But remember, entire amount does not move to costing P&L account. Only that part which is not realized will go to costing P&L account in case of abnormal loss, and that part which could not be realized of normal loss units will be deducted from this value. Then another important thing is you have to take care whether the material introduced in process is the mean material which is having units, or is it a sundry material. Very rarely, but sometimes it may also be said that the main material which has units is also procured from outside. So not entirely everything has moved from the previous process, but something was purchased as it is from the market as well. And similarly, the output of process is 19, majorly moving to the next process, but sometimes it may also be sold in the market. So that will depend upon the language of the question. So be careful, there can be subsequent materials also. This is the layout of a process account when you have 3 columns for unit, rate, and amount. But generally, we have only 2 columns, particulars, unit, and amount. So particulars will also be there. Otherwise, you can have another 3 columns or 2 columns. So this is how you prepare a process account. So what happens? I'll again say what is the input. So generally, you will have the material which you have put in the process and how many units and what is the amount. By dividing or given rate at the rate of this per unit. Then you will have wages or labor cost. Then you may have some direct expenses. Then share of overheads, which is directly attributable to the process account, and also share of indirect overheads. This will become your total cost by normal loss units. If they have any realizable value, then this figure will come here. So if there is no abnormal loss, all this abnormal gain, all this information, if you will put in the whatever is given in the question, if you put in this account, which will be very straightforwardly given, you will be have completed most of the part of your solution. After this, what you need to do is total cost, which is this figure, minus amount realized from sale of normal loss, divide by total unit, which is this figure, minus normal loss units. So in process costing, it is very important to first find out using the units uh, tally, what are the total units of input, and from there you will calculate the output, which will be your normal loss and units transferred to next process. This will give you the balancing figure, which will be assumed to be abnormal loss if the output is less, or abnormal gain if the output is more. So if the output is less, abnormal loss is appearing, then this completes the picture. But if the number of units of output is more, then there is abnormal gain. Then you don't write this first. Then you have to create another account here on the debit side, abnormal gain account. And some units will also appear here. And after that, you will take the total of all this only, not the abnormal loss. Okay? In the normal loss account, what will you write? To process one, whatever the units are and whatever the amount is. And that entire thing should be generally sold. So by bank, this should match, particularly if there is no loss, no abnormal loss. This should be the situation. So what I'm trying to say is if 100 units are moving into the process, there is a normal loss of 10%. So 10 units are lost. Output is 90. So if the output is 90 or anything less than 90, this will hold true because you will be able to sell 10 units as scrap. But if the output is 93, then this will not hold true. Then by bank, you will have only 7 units and the balance 3 units are to be charged from abnormal effectiveness account or abnormal gain account. But in bank, you will have only 7 units to sell, not 10. So in case the output is exactly 90 or less than 90, the normal account is complete by these two entries. However, if there is abnormal gain, then you have two entries, one by bank and the normal loss units which should have been sold but which could not be sold, that will be charged to abnormal gain account. In the abnormal loss account again, you will have to process account and this should be your abnormal loss, which should move to costing P&L account. However, just like normal loss units, these units may also be sold. So some of it will be recovered and the balance amount, this is with realizable value. The balance will go to the costing P&L account. Similarly, if there is abnormal gain, you will have on the credit side by process account, certain number of units, and this is your gain, which should move to costing P&L account, but not in its entirety. Why? Because some normal loss units which were supposed to be sold could not be sold. So normal loss units and the amount by which it should have been realized. So the balance will go to the costing P&L account, right? So this was all that we discussed in the last session. Let's complete one new question based on the same, and then we will. This is from your study material only, illustration, and then we'll move to the next topic. RST Limited processes product Z through two distinct processes. One is process 1 and the other is process 2. On completion, it is transferred to the finished stock account. From the following information for the current year, prepare process 1, process 2, and finished stock account. So this time we have to prepare the finished stock account as well. Raw material used is 7,500 units in process 1. Cost per unit is rupees 60 per unit. Amount or units transferred to next process or finished goods. So from process 1, 7,050 units are moving to process 2, and from process 2, 6,525 units are moving to finished goods account. Normal loss in the process is 5%. In process 2, it is 10%. Then you have direct wages, 135,750, 129,250. Direct expenses, which are 60% of the direct wages. Manufacturing overheads, which is 20% of the direct wages. Realizable value of scrap per unit is 12 rupee 50 paisa in process 1 and 37.50 in process 2. 6,000 units of finished goods were sold at a profit of 15% on cost. Assume no opening or closing work in progress. So first thing that you should do is to have a account for the units. So if you look at process 1, input is 7,500 units. Normal loss is 5%. So 5% of 750 is 375. Therefore, the expected output should be 7,125. However, the output is, which is moving to process 2, is 7,050. So the output is a little less than expected by how many units? 75 units. This 75 units becomes abnormal loss. So we should be having 7,125 units, but we have only 7,050 units. So where have these 75 units gone? They become abnormal loss. Process 2. How many units entered process 2 from process 1? 7,050. Nothing is purchased from outside. What is the normal loss? 10%. So 705 units should be lost in the process. So how many units should we have then? 7,050 minus 705. So we should be having 6,345 units. But how many units do we have? We have 6,525 units moving to the next process. So where have these extra units come from? 6,525 minus 6,345. So we have 180 units extra. This becomes abnormal gain. So process 1 has abnormal loss and process 2 has abnormal gain. Is it clear so far? So we will not say that output of 7,125 moved to process 2. Whatever is given, how many units transfer to the process 2? 7,050. So that will become the input for process 2. Out of which 10% loss, 705 is lost. So 6,345 units should be the output. Whereas how many units moved from process to the finished goods? 6,525. So where did we get this extra units? That becomes abnormal gain. It means that the workers was expected to work on 7,050 units, and in process they were supposed to lose 10% units, which is 705, but they managed the task efficiently, and so the actual units lost were not 705, but they were less. They were only 525 units lost, so the output came out to be 6,525. And we can see that the scrap is sold at the rate of 12.5 for process 1 and at the rate of 37.5 for process 2. Can prepare our process accounts now. So in process 1, to material, 7,500 units at the rate of 60 rupee per unit. So you have raw material to the tune of 4,50,000. Then there were some direct wages, some direct expenses as a percentage of wages, and some overheads, manufacturing overheads as a percentage of wages. We have seen the normal loss should be 5%, and it is to be sold at 1,35,750 is the wages. Direct expenses at the rate of 60% of wages and manufacturing overheads at the rate of 20% of wages. Okay, so we'll mention here. So 60% of 135,750 is 81,450 and 20% of manufacturing overheads, 20% of direct wages, which is 27,150. Normal loss is sold at the rate of 12.5. So 375 into 12.5. It is 4,687.50. I would keep it at 0.50. So I'll write after having completed the question that I have rounded off all figures or rupees in month up to 2 decimals. Okay. And I can also say that I'm ignoring the any paisa and rounding off to 4688. But in that case, I might find a slight challenge in matching my accounts. So at present, I'm keeping it at 2 decimals. Like I said, once you have done all this, after this you can stop and you can calculate the total of cost for like 50,000 plus 135,750 plus 81,450 and plus 27,150. So this is your total cost, 6,94,350 minus amount realized from sale of normal loss, 4687.50, divide by total introduced units, 7,500 minus normal loss units, 375. So ideally speaking, 4687.5. So you should be having a cost of 6,89,662.50, which should be borne by 7,125 units. So this establishes your rate, which is at the rate of 96.7947. So by transfer to next next process, But this is not 7125, it is 7050. So the balancing figure is abnormal loss of 75 units. But the rate that will be charged to process 2 units and 75 units is at the rate of 96.79. So this multiplied by 7050 is 6,82,403. It's 402.89, so I'm rounding off this to 403. Now you can calculate the balancing figure for abnormal loss. So this comes out to be 7259.60, but I will ensure that it matches. So 6,94,350, and just see how much this becomes. 7259.60. 6,94,350 minus 4687.50 minus 682,403 is 7259.50. Okay. If I had kept this at 88, this would have become 7259. So round off all money in absolute rupee, you can do that. This will also give you the same result, slight difference, which you can adjust for the rounding of figures. Okay. So let's say if I had taken it at 694,350 minus 4688, it would be 689,662 and divide by 7125. So it is equivalent to 96.79. Instead of 47, it is 46. So one in the same thing. So you can keep this also, 4688. And now once you have written it as 96.79, multiply 7050 into 96.79. This is 682,369. So there will be slight difference, okay? Which you can take. So 682,369. So I'm just telling you, you can take either this or this method. For 688 and 682,369.5. So 370. Earlier it was coming out to be 403. So there is a lot of difference, right? And then 75 into 96.79. This is 7259.25. So again rounded off. Now just see 4688 plus 682,370 plus 7259. 694. Okay, it was, I think, 80. 7050 into 96.79. 682,370. Right. So then you will see that there is some difference. Okay. So that you have to adjust, ensure that the total always tallies. Now you see the difference is too much. So what you can do is when you divide by 7125, the figure comes out to be 96.794666. So in your calculators, you can divide till last decimal and multiply by 7050. And you will see that this comes out to be 682402. So there is a lot of difference, approximately 22 rupees. So you can round off the figures in such a way that the difference should not remain too much. So this is your process one account. So from here, what will happen? This will move to process two. So process two will begin with to process one, 7050 units, costing 682403 at the rate of 96.79 approximately. Now again, here there was a normal loss of 10%. So you can straight away write 705, and the normal loss of process 2 was sold at 37.50. So 705 into 37.50 is once again 26,437.5. So I'll round off 438. Then you will incur other costs in process 2, which is 129,250. And of 129,250, direct expenses are 65%. So 84012.5, I'll round off to 13, and 15% are overheads. So overheads are 19387.5. Here I will ignore 0.5. So 1.5 I have rounded off to the higher number. 1.5 I have rounded off to the lower number. So this will ensure that the total costs are correctly recorded. To wages, to direct expenses at the rate of 65% of direct wages, to manufacturing overheads, which is at the rate of 15% of direct wages. Once this is done, I will stop here, and because this becomes my fundamental rule or the way in which I have to calculate the cost per unit. So 682,403 plus 129,250 plus 84013 and plus 19387. So the total cost comes out to be 9,15,053 minus 26,438. This divide by 7050 minus 705. 6345. All this will be part of your working notes. Calculating the cost of units produced on the basis of normal output. So this comes out to be 8,88,000 615 divided by 6345. So once again, the rate comes out to be 140.0496. So in by finished goods account, how many units moved to the finished goods account? 6525. So when this figure will be multiplied by 6525, you will get the price here 9,13,824. But it is at the rate of approximately 140.049 or 05. If you will use 140.05, maybe you will end up getting a difference of 20-30 rupees. So my suggestion is in your calculators, you can use up to the last decimal to find out the absolute cost. And then here you can write approximately 140.05. Similarly, if you look at the totals of the units here, it does not come out to be 7050. So this comes out to be 705 plus 6525. So the total units are 7230, whereas introduced was 70150. So there is a abnormal gain. And the abnormal gain is of 7050 minus 7280, which we have done in the working note initially also. So it is 180 units. What will be the price of 180? 180 into 140.0496. I'll write this figure on the side. As of now, I'll not put it in my account because I'll check the total here. It is 913,824 plus 26,438, which is 940,262. And from 940,262, I have to subtract 915,053. That will give me the price for abnormal gain. It comes out to be 25209, and therefore it exactly matches. So you will not have any problem with the rounding of figures. Your total process accounts and everything will match. If in your calculators you take up to the last digit, but here you can write approximately 140.05. Abnormal gain will also be calculated at 140.05 rupee per unit. Right. Okay. So this is your process account, but we have to prepare the finished goods account also here, 6525,913,824. So finished goods account. To process to 6525 units. Nine one three eight two four. Out of this, we say that 6,000 were sold at a profit of 15% on cost. So by cost of sales, 6,000 units will be sold, and you will have in the finished goods account closing stock 525 units. So 913824 divide by 6525, the same rate will come at 104.0496552. When multiplied by 6,000, it gives you the cost of sales, which is 8,40,297.93. I'm rounding off to 298. And the balancing figure will be your closing stock. This will again be at the rate of same 140.40496. Okay. But once again, you will ensure that it matches exactly. So this comes out to be 73526.04. So I'll round off to 73526. It's matching exactly 913824. This is how you will prepare the finished goods account. Right. And you can also prepare the profit and loss account or the income statement where you will have two cost of sales, which is 8,40,298, and a working note will be required here. The sales is at 15% profit on cost. So this time cost is known to us 8,40,298, and add profit to this at the rate of 15%. So it comes out to be 126,044.7. So I'll round off to 126,045. And when you add the profit to the cost, your sales become by sales 966,343. And here you can write to costing P&L or to net profit, which is 126,045. So this is how you can prepare all the accounts. I hope this is clear, right? So this is the complete question, how you will manage process one, process two, finished goods, costing account. If you have any doubts here, please ask. Otherwise, I move on to our next topic, which is equivalent production. Yes, Mithili, you want to ask something, please either type in the chat window or if you can unmute, please ask.
Yes, ma'am. Abnormal loss is showing which balance, ma'am? Debit balance or credit balance? And also abnormal gain shows which balance?
Right. We have
Abnormal.
not taken the abnormal loss or abnormal gain account here so far. So we've not completed that. Let's first complete. So costing P&L account will also change accordingly. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Let's look at this.
Your performer in starting class, today's starting class, your performer shows in process account abnormal loss is showing debit balance, but in this question you will put
No,
it in
in the
debit
previous
side.
class also, abnormal loss will has a debit balance, will be in the debit, but in the process account it will be credit. Loss is debit, right? But from the process account, loss is always debit. Why are we crediting here? Because we don't want it to be charged to process one account. In the first class also, abnormal loss will always be written on the credit side of the process one. That is how your units will tally. See,
Yes,
this is
first class you mentioned correctly, but today's starting time, your performer for process account you mentioned abnormal loss in debit side. That's why I'm confusing.
wait.
Yes, ma'am.
This is clear,
Yes, ma'am. Today's class
right?
starting performer. Yes, ma'am. This
Today,
one.
abnormal
Uh,
gain.
yes, ma'am. This will goes to credit side now.
Abnormal gain will be on debit of the process account. Abnormal loss will be on the credit. So if there is loss, it will come here.
Also,
Abnormal
normal
loss.
loss account you mentioned abnormal gain in credit side.
No, gain is on the debit side of the process account. Then when you prepare the normal loss account, how will this entry come? This normal loss will be on the debit of the normal loss account to process one. Okay. And why by abnormal gain? Why I have said this one? Okay, I think you got confused because of this. But this is
Yes,
not a process account. This is the normal loss account.
okay, ma'am. So it will
Okay.
show credit balance only
Uh,
abnormal gain
just
in
let
normal.
me, yes, let me complete this question where I
Yes,
will take the abnormal loss and abnormal gain account also. So you can
yes,
see the
ma'am.
process one account here.
Yes, ma'am.
In process one, there is a abnormal loss.
Yes, ma'am.
So if you prepare the abnormal loss account, it will show 75 units at 7259, right?
Yes, ma'am.
To process one account, 75 units at 7259, right? But this
Yes,
will also be sold at 12.5 rupees. So 75 units into 12.5 rupees. 937.5 rupees are recovered from bank. I will make it 938 and the balance will go to costing P&L account. Got it?
yes, ma'am.
So 7259 minus 938, I would say. So amount that goes to costing P&L is 6321. This is your abnormal loss account complete, right?
Yes, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. Understood.
No doubt?
Yes, ma'am. Understood.
Okay. So this amount of 6321 will also go to the costing P&L account we have just prepared. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
In process one, we also had a normal loss, 375, valuing 4688 to process one. And these are sold. So by bank, 375 units, 4688. Done? This account is also complete as far as process 1 is concerned. Normal loss account process 2. The normal loss account process 1 is complete. Okay. I have prepared separate. Units are matching, amount is matching, right? Now let's move on to process 2. Process 2 has given an abnormal gain of 180 units, which is giving us a profit of 25,209, right? Right, Mithili and everyone else? 180 units, which is giving us a profit of 25,209. So this will come on the credit side of the abnormal gain account by process 2. Okay. This should move to the costing P&L account. Okay, no problem. I hope it is clear. Just type in the chat window yes. Okay. So you have abnormal gain account where you are getting from process to 180 units. And these 180 units are giving you a profit of 25,209. But when you will prepare the normal loss account for process 2, you will say to process 2, there were 705 units, which should have fetched you 26,438. 705 26438. Now see if 7050 units are entering in process 2 and the finished goods units transferred are 6,525. So what is happening? 525 units are all that you have to sell as scrap, right? In process 2, 7050 units have entered and 6525 units are moving to the finished goods account. So out after 7050 minus 6525, how much is the scrap you have? 525 units. Whereas the normal loss account said that you will be having a scrap of 705 units, which could be sold for 26438. But now you have only 525 units, which are sold at the rate of 37.50. So by bank, we don't have 705 units to sell. So 705 into 37.5, it should have given us 26438. However, we have only 525 units to sell at 37.5. So we will be able to sell only 19,688. So where is the difference? This difference now abnormal gain account is credited, but it is not credited in the process account. It is credited in the normal loss account. So 180 units, which would have otherwise sold for 37.5, which means 6750, that we don't have. So this is how the normal loss account will balance. 6750 plus 19688, 26,438 is the total here. 705. Okay. And the units also 525 are sold and 180 has become abnormal gain. So in the abnormal gain account, we will say to process to 180 units at 25209, but to normal loss account of process 2, $180 units could not be sold, which would have otherwise given us 6,750 rupees. So our true costing P&L profit is 18,459. Okay. I'll repeat. Process account will be credited by abnormal loss and debited by abnormal gain. So if there is abnormal loss, then abnormal loss account will look like to process by bank by costing P&L. This amount will come from the process account. This will be the scrap value and the balance will be your loss. But and normal loss account will have absolutely no problem if there is a abnormal loss. So to process 1 and buy bank, exactly same units, same amount. Okay. But if there is abnormal gain, it will be on the debit of the process account. Therefore, in abnormal gain account, you will write by process. However, the normal loss account will also change. How will the normal loss account change? To process 2, but you will not have, let's say, 100 units are here. So or let's say 705 units are here, but you don't have 705 units to sell. You have only 525 units to sell at realized value or scrap value. So where the balance will be taken from? Abnormal gain account. Okay. So if abnormal gain account is taken with the realizable value here, 37.50. So in the abnormal gain account, you will have two normal loss account and only the balance will go to costing P&L. Okay. So the true profit is 18,459 only. 18,459. Now what you will get will be the true net profit. So 966,343 plus an abnormal gain of 18,459 minus cost of sales 840,298 minus abnormal loss 6,321. So your true profit is 1,38,183. Small differences because of rounding off. Got it? So what has happened in the process 1, 7,500? Yes, Maithili, you have still a question to ask. Please type it in the chat window if you cannot speak. So in process 1, 7,500 units were there. 5% was normal loss. So 375 units should have been lost. 7,125 units should have been produced. But actual produced were only, which moved to next process is 7,050. So the balancing figure 75 becomes abnormal loss. which is sold at the rate of 12.50. Similarly, in second process, 7050 units moved, and there was a normal loss. Right. See, if I am having 100 units and there is a loss of 10%, so I am expecting 90 units in my hand, and the total cost was, let's say, 9,000. So I am expecting that each unit will cost me 100 rupees, and scrap can be sold for, let's say, 2 rupees. So total cost was basically 9020. Out of that, 20 rupees I could realize from scrap, and the cost of 90 units should have been 100 rupees. However, what has happened is my output is exactly 100 units. So these 10 units which I'm having extra, which giving me a profit of 10 into 100,000 rupees. So my profit becomes 1,000 rupees. Why? Because I have 10 units extra. The workers did not give a loss of even a penny. Okay? Not one single rupee loss. Yes, you have to prepare all the accounts. Abnormal loss, abnormal gain, normal loss account for process one, process two, everything. So what I'm saying is I had 100 units. I was expecting 90 units to be a normal output. Okay. I was expecting uh, 90 units, and the cost should have been 9,000 by 90, 100 rupees. But because the workers have worked very well, the entire 100 units were good units, no normal loss. So I am having 10 units extra at 100,000. But just because I have these 10 units extra, I have zero scrap. So the 20 rupees which I should have got as scrap value, I haven't realized it. So truly speaking, my profit is 980, not 1,000. Okay, got it? Right. So if you will prepare the abnormal loss and abnormal gain account, you will be able to clearly see why things are having. So process one is clear. All the cost credited by normal loss, transfer to next process, and abnormal loss. So total all the cost and subtract from this the amount realized from normal loss, divide by the total units minus normal loss units. 90% whatever is transferred to next process, whether abnormal gain, abnormal loss, all is taken at this rate only. Then you had the process 2 account, 7050 units moved. When you total all these costs and subtract from it 26438, your rule is established. So the cost comes out to be 140.0496. Then you have already calculated the account of your units. Out of 7050, 705 should have been lost. So your output should have been 6345. But because the output is more than this, 6525, 180 units is abnormal gain. This will come on the debit side. So the total units would be 72530, and 180 into 140.0496 will give you the benefit you had of 25,209. But just imagine if you did not get these units 180 extra, you would have at least sold it as scrap at 37.5. So you cannot say 25,209 is your profit. 25,209 minus 180 into 37.50. So because of this, the normal loss account will also be impacted. So you thought 705 units at 37.5, you will get this much as scrap value. However, you only had in your hand 525 units to sell at 37.5. So you got a scrap of only 19,688. So if this 180 units would not have been abnormal gain, then also 6750 would have come as a scrap. So 25,209 minus 6750 is your true profit, which will go to costing P&L account. 18,459. Okay, this is your true profit. So in process account, abnormal loss is on the credit side, abnormal gain is on the debit side. The same entry will move to the abnormal loss and abnormal gain account on the opposite side. And then if there is abnormal loss, it will be sold as scrap and the balance will go as costing profit and loss as loss. If it is abnormal gain, the debit will be side will be charged to the normal loss account. The units which could have otherwise been sold as scrap are now not being sold. Only the difference, the balancing figure will go to the costing P&L account. So the normal loss account does not have 705 units to sell. It has only 525. So 180 units is charged from normal loss account. And in the normal loss account, it is charged from abnormal gain account. Right. I hope it is clear. In abnormal gain account, how it is 180 units on the both sides. Okay. So units, 180 units have come from the process two, that there should be 180 units extra produced than expected. So this becomes abnormal gain. And these 180 units, which could have otherwise sold in the normal loss, have not been sold. So units and units will also match, no? So we are crediting the abnormal gain with the process two account from where these units have come, and we are charging it to the normal loss account where it could not have been sold. Okay? So units will always match with the units and amount should always match with the amount. Costing P&L profit is so costing P&L profit is of three elements. Number one, sales minus cost of goods sold or cost of sales. So this came out to be 126,045. However, there was abnormal gain of 24,000 something, but out of this, 6,000 which we could not realize because of scrap is deducted, and there is abnormal gain of 18,459. This is also to be added. So your total profit should be this 144,604. However, there was an abnormal loss of 6,321 that will be deducted. So your true profit will be 138,183. The balancing figure is right. All right. We move on to next topic, which is equivalent units. So when we talk about equivalent units, we have to prepare four statements. Statement of equivalent units, one. Statement of cost per unit for each element of cost. Then how you will allocate this cost, and then you can prepare the process accounts. What is statement of equivalent units? Just imagine so far in the process accounts, we have generally not dealt with stocks. We have generally not dealt with stocks. Correct. So in process accounts, we have not dealt with stocks. Stocks of raw material, though it can be there. Stocks of work in progress, WIP. And stocks of finished goods in various processes. So Regarding finished goods, we have made an assumption. All that is produced is transferred to next process, right? So we don't have warehouses where we keep the semi-finished goods of process one or the output of process one, process two, like that, because that does not have a sellable market, we assume, and entire production is transferred to the next process. Yeah, I am taking up the WIP, work in progress. Equivalent units is majorly related to work in progress. How will you value the work in progress or equivalent production? And raw material stocks generally, if it is mentioned in the question, you assume it to be there, which will reduce your cost, and you can put it on the credit side as by closing stock of raw material. However, nothing is mentioned, so you will ignore. But work in progress means those units which are neither raw material, which are neither 100% complete. So they are something which is left in the middle, or they are in a process of completion. So that is called work in progress. Now, when you are doing equivalent unit statements, all your fundamentals which we have learned so far, process account, abnormal loss account, abnormal gain account, etc., all these information will be relevant. And how do we prepare the various statements, equivalent units, cost per unit, allocation, process cost accounts? Let's look at this. To give you a simple example, if supposing start preparing for your exam and you pick up the first chapter, right? And you complete it 20%, and then you leave it, you find it boring, not interesting, so you leave it there. So you started with the first chapter, you didn't find it interesting. So after having completed 20%, you left this chapter. Then you started doing the second chapter. You completed it 50%, and then you took a lunch break. You started with the third chapter. When you came back after lunch, you forgot that you were doing second chapter, you thought it was complete, and you started doing third chapter. And in third chapter, by the time you had completed it 80%, you felt asleep. Okay? So this is your output. How many units of finished goods if I say from here? Zero. But does it mean you have done anything or you have not done anything? No. You have done something. So if I say one chapter 20% complete plus second chapter 50% complete plus third chapter 80% complete, that means 0.20 plus 1 plus 2.40 is equivalent to 3 point, sorry, third chapter. All chapters are one only. It's second chapter, not two chapters. One chapter 20% complete, one chapter 50% complete, and one chapter 80% complete. So, is it that you have not done anything? No. You have done something. How much? One chapter 20% complete is 0.20 plus 0.50 plus 1. So we can say that you have completed 1.5 equivalent units of finished product. So you have three chapters, which are all three are WIP, but because they are certain percentage complete, so you cannot say that you've not done anything. You have done 1.5 chapters equivalent job. So equivalent units means how much you have got it done. Okay. Now, when you prepare the equivalent unit statements, you prepare them either on the basis of FIFO or on the basis of weighted average. So if tomorrow you complete all the three chapters which you had picked up today, if the next day you sit down again for your studies and you complete all the three chapters once again, not 3.6 Navneet. These are not third chapter. It is the third chapter, second chapter. So chapter is only one. One chapter 20% done, one chapter 50% done, and one chapter 80% done. So zero point 0.2 plus zero point 0.5 plus zero point 0.8 is equivalent to 1.5 chapters complete. So if you could have really sit down on one chapter only and started doing it, you would have completed the first chapter and second chapter would have been half complete. Now, next day again, you sit down for your studies. And next day, if you complete all these chapters and pick up another two chapters, so you would have completed 5 chapters the second day, right? Fourth and fifth chapter complete. So on the second day, you would say that I have done 5 chapters. But on the basis of FIFO, I would say how many equivalent units of chapter you have done, though you may have 5 chapters completed by now, but on the first chapter, you have already completed 20% yesterday. So today you would work on that for 80%. Second chapter was already completed 50% yesterday. So today you would have to complete it, you would have required another 50% of time. And third chapter is already completed 80% previous day. So now you would have worked on it 20% only. And plus another 2 chapters, which you started from beginning and completed. So once again, on the second day, your output would be 3.5 units of equivalent chapters, though you have completed 5 chapters. Okay. So this is how we calculate the statement of equivalent units. It is not about chapters, it is about units. When we talk about equivalent units, we don't at all look at rupees. Any figure in rupees is totally irrelevant to us when you're preparing the statement of equivalent units. All that we are interested in is how many units of opening work in progress was there? How much percent was it already complete? How many fresh introduced units have been put in the process in this period? And what is the status of the closing stock, normal loss, abnormal loss, or abnormal gain? So we are only interested in units. So if the concept is slightly clear to you, I'll proceed with the question here or the concept in process accounts, how we do it. So I have taken the example of your preparation, but let's say how we do it in the process account. So let's say there would be a opening work in progress. Let's say 5,000 units. No. And first day FIFO, second day weighted average, no. I'm explaining again by taking units. So pay attention now, you will understand. Opening work in progress is 5,000 units. It was already completed as to the various elements of cost previously only. So material was 100% completed on the process, these units. Labor was only 60% complete, and overheads was also already 50% complete. So opening WIP was 5,000 units, which was 100% complete as far as material is concerned. But labor and overheads wise, it was 60 and 50% complete. Generally, material will be 100% because you will pick the raw material in a process, pick the material and start working on it. So raw material is already 100% utilized. So on this, you apply the conversion costs. What are the conversion costs? Not the material, but the labor plus overheads. I'm writing in short, L for labor and overheads O. And I'll generally use this terminology here. Okay. I'll use this short form L and O for labor and overheads now onwards. So you start picking the raw material and then you start working on it. So then you apply the labor and overheads. So generally your WIPs would be 100% complete as far as material is concerned, whereas labor and overheads may not be fully employed. However, if you pick up, let's say we have taken an example of chairs and you start painting it. Okay. So if you take up the chair would be 100%. So material one is 100% because you picked up the chair and started working on it. But when you apply the paint is applied as and when you are working. So maybe the material two is also, we can say, 60% complete as far as material two. So you picked up the chair, started painting it. The process is to paint the chairs. So the fundamental raw material, the main raw material of units is 100% complete, but the paint which is subsequently applied on the chairs, that is only 60% complete. Okay. So not getting into these nitty-gritties now, we'll discuss this in detail when we take up the question. So far, let's focus on this. So you had, when you started this particular year or this period, you had 5,000 units of opening work in progress, which was already semi-complete, but they were 100% complete as far as material is concerned, and 60% complete as far as labor is concerned, and 50% complete as far as overheads are concerned. So this is what you have to complete in this period. Then you start further introduce another 50,000 units of raw material on which you have to work. Okay. So your input units are complete. How many units of input units are there? Total 55,000. Why 55,000? 5,000 opening WIP and 50,000 introduced. Now what happens is we expect a normal loss in the process. Let's say 10%. We know that how many units transfer to next process. Maybe this is given. Let's say 30,000. We know what is closing work in progress. Let's say 18,000 units. Now again, this is closing work in progress. So it would be complete as far as material, labor and overheads to a certain degree. These units which are transferred to the next process, they are 100% complete in all respects. That's why they have moved to the next process. But the closing work in progress, again, 18,000 units. All these are units, nothing is rupees, okay? These 18,000 units, they would also be complete as far as material, labor and overheads to some degree. So on these 18,000 units, once again, material is 100% used. Labor is, let's say, 30% utilized. And overheads are also, let's say, 40% incurred. So this information is given to you. On the basis of this, the first thing you will do is to calculate the missing figure, missing or rather, I would say, balancing figure of units. First step, balancing figure of units to find whether there is abnormal loss or abnormal gain. So the first step is to find out the balancing figure of units and see whether there is an abnormal loss or abnormal gain. So input units was 55,000. Normal loss is 10%. When I say normal loss of 10%, this statement is vague. It has three implications or possibilities. One, 10% of total input. In that case, normal loss will become 10% of 55,000. 10% of current input. In that case, it will become 10% of 50,000. So normal loss will then be 5,000 units. But if it is 10% of total input, then normal loss units would be 5,500. And 10% of gross production may also be said. So if it is said 10% of gross production is how much? Opening plus introduced minus closing. So gross production is 5,000 plus 50,000 minus 18,000. 55 minus 18, 37,000. In that case, the normal loss would be 3,700 in this example. Okay. So these are the three possibilities how normal loss can be calculated. 10% of total input, 10% of units currently introduced in the process, or 10% of gross production. If it is total input, loss will be on 55,000 units. If it is current input, loss will be on 50,000 units. If it is on gross production, you will have to calculate gross production by taking opening stocks plus introduced less closing. That will give you gross production 37,000. In this question, let's say it is 10% of total input. So I'm going by 1. Give you 10 minutes break. Just give me 2 minutes, then I'll give you the break. 10% of total input. So normal loss is 5,500. So now we start looking at what is happening to the output units. 5,500 went in the normal loss, transferred to next process. How many? 30,000. And closing work in progress. These three will be generally given, which is 18,000. What is the total of output here now? 30 plus 18, 48 plus 5,500. So it's 53,500. A little less than 55,000. So the balancing figure is abnormal loss of how many units? 1,500 units. Right? I hope this part is clear. If this is clear, substantial things are done. What is 49,500? Navneet? Okay. 55,000 minus 5,500. So we need to have the details of 49,500 further. Out of 49,500, we can say 30 move to the next process and 18 is closing WIP. So 49,500 minus 48,000, 1,500 becomes your abnormal loss. Right. Uh, Someone raised a hand. I hope it is clear. Otherwise, please type your question. All right, you can take a 10 minutes break, and those who want to ask question, I can take up their doubts. You can unmute and speak, please. Others can take a 10 minutes break. Yes, it is a break, but someone is asking some questions, so please allow them to ask if they have. Anyone can ask the question if you have. Otherwise, you can take your 10 minutes break. No doubt? All right. Ma'am, closing WIP units, we have to compute equivalent units, right, ma'am? Right. No, not now. We are looking at the overall position, not now. We are not looking at the equivalent units element wise. We are first looking at the overall position to find out how much is the abnormal loss or abnormal gain. Equivalent units have absolutely no role here to play when we are trying to figure out the balancing figure as abnormal loss or abnormal gain. Equivalent units will come into the picture when we will calculate the equivalent units as far as material is concerned, labor is concerned, and overheads are concerned. First step is to find out the balancing figure looking at the overall units, not the equivalent units. All right, you can go for break. The question is silent. Write your assumption 10% loss of current input or total input, whichever is more convenient to you. The answer for all three will not be same. 10% of 5,500 is th- this is, I'll take a different color. This will be 5,500, which we have taken here. This would be 5,000, which would have been different. This would have been 3,700. So your abnormal loss, which is 1,500 in situation one, would become 2,000 in situation two and would become 3,300 in situation three. 5,000 plus 30, 35, and 18, 53. So if 53,000 is the total units produced, abnormal loss would be 2,000. And if I write here 3,700, 3,700 plus 30,000 plus 18,000. So it is 51,700, which means abnormal loss of 3,300. So the balancing figure will change accordingly. So this is clear how we calculate the details of the input and output. Now we will talk about the equivalent units also. So this is one performer. We can do it on the basis of FIFO, or we can do it on the basis of LIFO also. But generally LIFO is not followed. So FIFO and weighted average, these are two important concepts. So let us look at the details of the units from the perspective of FIFO and material. So what happened in, you will prepare the performer something like this, which I'll show you in the next slide also. You will have a left column which will have detail of input, and the right column will have detail of output. So input units will have particulars and units. So particulars are opening WIP, 5,000 units, and units introduced in the process, 50,000 units. The detail of output again would be based on elements of cost. You will have three elements of cost: material, labor, and overheads. Generally, you may also have four elements of cost: material 1, material 2. And you will also see the percentage completion of this and equivalent units. Percentage completion of labor and equivalent units. Percentage completion of overheads and equivalent units. Output will also have details of particulars and units. These particulars would be normal loss, units transferred to next process, close to, and the balancing figure. If it is less, then there will be abnormal loss. If it is more, the units turn out to be more, then you will subtract in this column only abnormal gain. You will not have debit and credit. It is a statement of equivalent units. So if there is abnormal loss, it will come here only. But if it is abnormal gain, you will have to subtract it. Now, some important thing. Number one, normal loss is always assumed to be 0% complete. Why? Because the cost of the normal loss is to be borne by good units, right? So normal loss is never assumed to be having any completion percentage. It is always assumed to be 0% complete. The percentage completion of abnormal loss is always taken as 100% complete. So abnormal loss is 100% complete. As far as material, labor, overheads, abnormal loss is 100% complete. Reduction in abnormal gain. See, first let me complete this and I'll come on to your question. So normal loss is always assumed to be 0% complete. Abnormal loss is taken as 100% complete as far as all elements are concerned, material, labor, and overheads. However, question may specifically tell that abnormal loss is 100% complete as far as material is concerned, 60% complete as far as labor is concerned, or any other percentage. So percentage for abnormal loss may be given. If it is given, use this. If it is not given, then 100% assumption. Okay. Third, abnormal gain is always 100%. Abnormal gain means completed units. So completed unit will mean 100%. Always 100%. So normal loss is always 0% complete. Abnormal gain is always 100% complete. But abnormal loss, if nothing is mentioned, then you may take as 100% complete. But if it is mentioned, then you have to use those percentages for various elements. Repeating once again, even if these percentages are given, normal loss is always 0% complete. So normal loss 0%, abnormal loss 100% if nothing is given. But if some figures are given, use them. And abnormal gain is always 100% complete. Now your question, why we are subtracting. So if you have opening WIP 5,000, introduced 50,000. So total you have to give a detail of 55,000 units. So if it is normal loss, let's say 5,500, transfer to next process 30,000, closing WIP 18,000. So what did turn out to be the normal loss? 1,500. Okay. No abnormal gain. Total matches to 55,000. Right? Now, if instead of 10%, if I had said the normal loss was 20%, think about it. 20% of total input. Then normal loss would have been 20% of 55,000, which is 11,000. Now, out of 55,000 units, 11,000 goes to normal loss, 30 goes to the next process, 18 is closing WIP. How much is the total? 48 plus 11, 59,000. Okay. 30 plus 11, 41, 41 plus 18, 59,000. How much are the units here? 55. So we cannot say that we have input 4,000 as abnormal gain minus abnormal gain 4,000. So when you will subtract this, you will have the total of 55,000. Is it clear? In order to reduce normal, will add up, right, ma'am? In order to reduce normal loss, will reduce, right, ma'am? Okay. So this is how you do all the calculations, right? Now, changing the figures back to what they were. So there is no abnormal gain in this question. Normal loss is 5,500. So there is a abnormal loss of 1,500. So normal loss is always 0% complete. Units transferred are bifurcated into two. Here comes the role of FIFO and weighted average. So what does FIFO says? You have transferred 30,000 units to the next process. If you are following FIFO, you would have transferred first these 5,000 units, and the balance would have been transferred from the units which are introduced. So out of the 30,000, 5,000 was opening WIP, now complete, and 25,000 are the freshly introduced units. Is this concept clear? FIFO says if you have transferred 30,000 units to the next process, yeah, the answer will either be abnormal gain or abnormal loss. So if we follow FIFO and we have transferred 30,000 units to the next process, FIFO says the units you transferred were first 5,000 of opening WIP and then balance 25,000 from the current production, current introduced units. Now, if you are transferring these 5,000 units, do you need to apply any material on this? The answer is no. It is already 100% complete. So you would have applied 0% raw material on this. If you had transferred these 5,000 units by completing them, they were already 60% complete. So you would have applied only 40% efforts to complete the labor. And overheads wise, they were already 50% complete. So you would have applied only 50% efforts or resources to complete the units as far as overheads is concerned. So out of this 30,000, 5,000 units, material we did not apply, labor we had to apply 40%, and overheads we had to apply 50%. But the freshly introduced 25,000, obviously, they were 100% complete as far as material is concerned, labor is concerned, and overheads are concerned within this period only. Closing WIP. It's complete this year, material wise 100%, labor and overheads wise 30 and 40%. So 18,000 is 100% complete this period only as far as material is concerned, 30% complete as far as labor is concerned, and 40% complete as far as overheads are concerned. The question does not talk about scrap percentage completion. How much percent is scrap completed? So we assume abnormal loss to be 100% completed. Then we realized it's a abnormal loss or a defective unit and discarded that. Now it is very simple. 5,500 into 0%, 0. 5,500 into 0%, 0. 5,500 into 0%, 0. 5,000 units into 0%, 0. 5,000 into 40% is equivalent to as if you have worked on 2,000 units. 5,000 units, 50% complete is equivalent to as if you have worked on 2,500 units. 25,000 units, 100% complete as far as material is concerned, labor is concerned, and overheads are concerned. Complete 25,000. 18,000 of closing WIP, 100% complete as far as material is concerned. 18,000 into 100% is 18,000. 18,000 into 30% is 5,400. And 18,000 into 40% is 7,200. 1,500 into 100%, 1,500 into 100%, and 1,500 into 100%. So this becomes your equivalent units as far as material is concerned, labor is concerned, overheads are concerned. So 25 plus 18, 43 and 1500. So 44,500 units of raw material has been employed. 25 plus 2, 27 plus 5400, 32,400 plus 1500, 33,900. Overheads 25,000 plus 2,500, 27,500, 27,500 plus 7,200, 34,700 and 1,500, 36,200. So this is the equivalent units as far as material, labor, and overheads is concerned. So once again, normal loss is always 0%. Abnormal loss is 100% if no specific mention of completion is given. And closing WIP it is always given. For units completed, we divide it into two. Something wrong? Did I calculate wrong? Wait a minute. 25 and 18. 44,500, 37 and 5. 27 and 5. 32,400, 33,900. Okay. What is 58,700? I'm not clear, Akhila. 30,000, 5,000 from opening WIP and 25,000 from current stock. Yes, Golti, Anil Golti, right. Okay. Now, this is how you will do the questions. Finally, we will calculate. So if the total material cost is X, if the total material cost is X, then something will be realized from the sale of normal loss units, let's say at the rate of 1 rupee. So X minus 5,500 will be divided by 44,500 to find out the material cost per unit. So this is the statement of evaluation or statement of cost for each element of cost. If the total labor cost is Y, Y will be divided by 33,900 to find out the labor cost per unit. If overhead costs come out to be Z, Z will be divided by 36,200 units to find out the cost of overheads per unit. So this is how we prepare first the statement of equivalent product units. Once you have prepared the statement of equivalent units, rest everything is very easy. So material minus scrap realized from normal loss divided by material number of units, equivalent units of material, labor cost divided by equivalent units of labor, with overheads cost divided by equivalent units of overheads. So this will give us the complete cost per unit. And then if you want to find out what is your value of closing stock, so 18,000 into, let's say this is A, this is B, this is C. So if I want to find out what is my closing WIP value, 18,000 into A plus 5,400 into B plus 7,200 into C. What is the cost of abnormal loss? 1,500 into A plus 1,500 into B plus 1,500 into C. How much did the cost I incur in completing my opening WIP? 0 into A, 2,000 into B plus 2,500 into C. Okay, right. So this is how you prepare the statement of equivalent units. How will this output break up in case of weighted average? I will come on to that. For Y and Z, we need not deduct 54. Yes. So entire realizable value of scrap should be assumed to be reducing the cost of raw material. Nothing from, you cannot divide, subtract it again and again because the cost has been reduced only once. Something has been recovered from the market by selling normal loss only once. So it needs to be deducted only once. So you will deduct it at here only. Why sometimes the price of abnormal loss is given or the percentage completion of abnormal loss is given? because sometimes when you are in the manufacturing process, you realize that the units are defective or not worth transferring to the next process only after you have 100% completed them. So when the final output is in your hand, then you see that this is not possible to transfer to next process. Therefore, this is an abnormal loss. But sometimes when you are in the middle of the process, at that point only you realize, let's withdraw these units. They are not good enough. They should not be continued. Think about it when your mothers make chapatis in your house. So if they get burnt from one side, she will not cook it from the other side again and then throw it. She will there and then discard it when something goes wrong. So sometimes you can realize that it's an abnormal loss in the middle of the process. Sometimes you know it only when it is completed. So therefore, if nothing is mentioned, we'll assume it to be 100% complete. Similarly, if normal loss can be sold at 1 rupee per unit, we will assume the abnormal loss also to be sold at 1 rupee per unit if no separate rate for abnormal loss sale is given, which will 99% will not be given. Okay. All right. So let's take up one question here, and there is one doubt. Mithila, for Y and Z, we need not deduct that I have taken. Anything else? Okay. So under FIFO, we assume opening is complete first and then the introduced are complete. Whereas in weighted average, we don't make this bifurcation. And I'll come on to that in a very easy manner once you complete this part. So let's take one example. This has got nowhere mentioned anything about rupees. In the entire example, you don't see absolutely anything about rupees. So the following data pertains to process 1. You have opening WIP 1500 units, which is already 100% complete as far as material is concerned, and one third or 33 1/3% complete as far as labor and overheads are concerned. And then you had 18,500 units as input of material. I'll take this format. You can see this is the same format which I have drawn earlier. Particulars of input, units. Particulars of output, units. Elements of cost, material, labor, overheads. How much percent complete, equivalent units. Percent complete, equivalent units, percent complete, equivalent units. And we are following the FIFO method. So like I said, don't get into material labor overheads until and unless you have found out whether there is a abnormal loss or abnormal gain. So first we need to find the complete hisab of input and output units, the complete account of that. So input units, like you have seen, 1500 and 18500. Unlike the process account, now it is easy for me to write here the total, because even if there is a normal gain, it has to be deducted from this side only. So I can add the two. Total becomes 20,000. So I'm going to give you a detail of 20,000 units. Where have these 20,000 units gone? So out of 20,000, 5,000 is closing WIP, which is 90% complete as far as material is concerned. So you see, material was gradually being introduced in the process. And there was labor and overheads, 30% complete. The normal loss in process is 10% of total input. So this would, I said, would be mentioned. Normal loss 10% of total input, of current input, or of gross production. Here it is saying of total input. Now we have seen the total input is 20,000. Normal loss at the rate of 10% of total input is 2,000. Agree? Closing WIP was 5,000. So 2 plus 5, 7. Units transferred to the next process, 12,000. Okay. 12,000. But because I am doing FIFO, I will bifurcate the 12,000 here itself. WIP now complete 1500, transferred to next process, and introduced and completed, therefore, balancing figure of 10,500. Right? 12,000 units are complete. So first, because of FIFO, first 1500 these units would be completed, and then the remaining would be completed from 18,500. So total completed are 12,000, 1500 opening WIP complete, balance 10,500 from freshly introduced. Now just take the total of the input output units. 2 plus 12, 14, 14 and 5, 19. So I have the information of 19,000 units, 2,000, 3,500, 14,000, 19,000. So this becomes 1,000 as the balancing figure of abnormal loss, right? So I have done my first part. I have found out the details of the units. Now, like I said, if the question does not mention anything, normal loss is always 0% complete as far as material, labor, and overheads is done. Opening WIP will now be completed. So you subtract this from 100. So already 100% complete, 100 minus 100, now 0%. Since labor and overheads already 100% complete, so now 100 minus 33, 1 by 3 complete, so now 66, 2 by 3. Generally, don't take 33, 1 by 3 or 66, 2 by 3%. When you get this percent, take it as 1/3. So 2/3 you need to work again. Otherwise, in percentages, you might end up getting fractions. So this will become 66.66666. So if you write 66.67, it will be slightly more. And if you leave it to 66.66, there is no limit up to which you can take the round figure, right? So in this situation, better 1/3 and 2/3. So opening WIP, which was 1500 units, was already 100% complete as far as material is concerned. And we needed to only complete it 1/3 complete as far as labor and overheads. So we need to complete only 2/3. Input total and output total will always match because you are taking the balancing figure. All right, opening WIP. As material wise, it was already 100% complete. So now 0%. Since labor and overheads wise, it was 2/3, 1/3 complete. So you may write 66.67, but for your calculations, you can take 2/3 of 1500 only. Introduced and completed as they are introduced in this process only. So 100% work is done now only. Closing WIP, it's mentioned. Material 90, labor and overheads 30. Labor and overheads 30, 30. Abnormal loss, as no percentage loss of scrap is given, so 100%. Right? Now I think it's easy for you to calculate everything. Simply multiply 2000 units into 0%. I use it. 2000 into 0% 0, 2000 into 0% 0. 1500 into 0% 0, 1500 into 66.67% or 2/3, 1000, 1000. This is 100% complete. Five thousand into 90%, 4,500. 5,000 into 30%, 1,500. 5,000 into 30%, 1,500. 1000 into 100%, 1000, 1000, and 1000. So the total of equivalent units of material, labor, and overheads is going to be 10,500 plus 4,500 is 15,000 plus 1, 16,000. So whatever will be the cost of raw material will be divided by 16,000. 10,500 plus 1,000, 11,500 plus 1,500, 13,000 plus 1, 14,000. So labor is 14,000 and overheads are also, you will check 14,000 only. One important information that I will like to share here is, okay, great. As you can see that the labor and overheads percentage was same, 0, 0, 2/3, 2/3, 100, 100, 30, 30, 100, 100. Why? Because in opening WIP also it was same. In closing WIP it was same. In normal loss also we assume 0%. And in abnormal loss also we assume 100%. So in all the places, the labor and overheads percentage was exactly same. So instead of making separate column for labor and overheads, because you will be always short of time in exam, you can combine the two, labor and overheads, and ignore the third and last two columns. Okay. But then remember that when you are taking the cost of material, you will have minus scrap realized from normal loss. This will be divided by 16,000 units of material, equivalent units of material. Labor cost divide by 14,000. So even if you have combined labor and overheads, don't forget to write the overheads cost divide by 14,000 units of equivalent units of overhead. Right? So this is how you prepare a statement of equivalent units FIFO method. There are very few changes we are going to make if it is weighted average. You can write it down, take a screenshot of this. And then what are the 3-4 changes which you will make if it had been a weighted average? In this first statement of equivalent units, there are only 1 or 2 changes. Number 1, you will write here weighted average. Okay. And then you will do this question with 12,000. You will not have separate opening WIP now complete and introduced completed. So this will combine 12,000 units, 100%, 100%, and 100%. All that you need to change is only this, that you write here weighted average and don't bifurcate the completed units into two parts. The entire 12,000 is assumed to be completed now only. So 12,000 into 100%, 12,000 into 100%, 12,000 into 100%. So in that way, your answer would be 12 plus 4,500 plus 1,000, 17,500. This will automatically change to 17,500. This will change to 12 plus 13,500, 14,500. This will also automatically change to 12 and 13,500, 14,500. So all you need to do from your part is only don't bifurcate opening WIP, now complete and introduced and complete. So don't bifurcate 12,000 into two parts. That's it. Rest everything will come automatically. So in the final answers, you will see only these 3 changes. Here weighted average would be written. Here only one line would be there. Don't say introduced and completed. You simply say completed and transfer to next process, 12,000 into 100%, 100%, 100%. So your these figures will automatically change to 17,500, 14,500, and 14,500. Why this will change, increase by 1,500? Because here it was 0, this 1,500 will also come added. Here it was 1,000, another 500 will be added. Here it was 1,000, another 500 would be added, right? But not to confuse you. So just to tell you, in case it is weighted average, all that would change is that don't bifurcate this 12,000. Let it be just one. That's it. And make it 100% complete. That's it. Nothing else. Rest everything will follow automatically. So you will just write here weighted average and just don't bifurcate the 12,000 into opening WIP now complete and introduced and complete. Simply say units completed and transferred to next process. Okay, easy. The difference between FIFO and weighted. As far as statement of equivalent units is concerned. So this is how you will prepare. So what I would have I done had it been weighted average? We can quickly do it. Input will remain same. Normal loss was 2,000. This will not be there. This will simply say 12,000. And closing WIP would be 5,000 still. And abnormal loss would be how much it was? 1,000. So this is always 0%. This will always be 100%. This was 90% and 30%. So I'm not even calculating this time for the overheads. Leave it. I call it labor and overhead. And this is 100% and 100%. So you will see 0, 12,000, 4,500, and 1,000. So the total comes out to be 17,500. Here, 12,000, 1,500, and 1,000. 14,500. Okay, as simple as that. So absolutely no problem if you are doing the question using weighted average. All you have to do is do not bifurcate the completed units into two different segments. Okay. Continuing with the same question. Now what I have done is I have given the value in rupees to the same question. So opening work in progress still remains same, 1,500 units. Labor and overheads, again 100% complete, and labor and overheads 1/3. Input of material is different here, 18,500 units with raw material cost 52,000, labor cost 14,000, overheads cost 28,000. Closing work in progress 5,000 units, 90% complete as far as material is concerned, 30% complete as far as labor and overheads are concerned. Normal loss is 10% of total input. Scrap value is also given, 2 rupee per unit, and units transferred to the next process is 15,000 units. So slight change in the units introduced. Here it is only 18,500 only, same, sorry. And transfer to next process is 12,000 here, but in this question 15,000. So slight difference, right? How will it impact? Let's see. Once again, input is 1500, introduced is 18,500. So far, same. We are doing it FIFO method. Total is 20,000. Normal loss 10% of total input. So once again, 2000. As we are doing FIFO, so opening WIP now complete will be 1500. And as total of 15,000 units have moved to the next process, 1500 opening WIP complete and 13,500 introduced and completed. Closing work in progress is still 5,000. However, this time you may not get an abnormal loss, you may get an abnormal gain. Find out the total of this side. 2,000 plus 15,000, 17,000. 17 plus 5 is 22,000. So you will say less abnormal gain. 2,000 plus 1,500, 3,500. 3,500 plus 13,500, 17,000. 17 and 5, 22,000. Minus 2,000 is 20,000. All right, let's look at the degree complete. Normal loss is always 0%. Opening WIP was material-wise 100% complete, so now it is 0%. Labor and overheads wise, it was 33 1 by 3. So now it is 66.67%. I don't need the third column. Like I said, all percentages are same across every base. Introduced and completed is always 100% because this is was put in the process in this time only, and now only it is 100% complete. Yes, it has automatically. The reason, it's not a reason, it has naturally come up in the process. So yes, 13,500, how did it came? Units transferred to the next process are 15,000. So if 15,000 units are transferred from the next process to the next process and we are following FIFO, first these 1,500 units will go to the next process. So where from this balance units? What else? 13,500 will come from those which have been introduced in the process. So closing work in progress was 90% complete and 30% complete as far as labor and overheads was concerned. And abnormal gain is always 100% complete. But it is in the negative. So what is the statement of equivalent units? 2000 into 0. So this will remain 0, 0, 0. This will be 0, 1,000 and 1,000. This will be 13,500, 13,500, 13,500. This will be 5,000 into 90%, 4,500, 5,000 into 30%, 1,500, 5,000 into 30%, 1,500. 2,000 into 100%, 2,000, but you have to show it in the negative. So equivalent units of material, 13 plus 4, 17 and 18,000 minus 2,000, 16,000. 14,000 and 14,000. Okay. So 16,000, 14,000 and 14,000. This is the statement of equivalent units. Right. Now it is easy. You will prepare the second statement, which is the statement of cost for each element of cost. Okay. So very simple again. All you have to do is from 52,000 cost of material, which is the element material, cost 52,000 less scrap realized from sale of normal loss. So even though we don't have normal loss units of 2,000, right? Why? Because think about it, 20,000 units, 15 goes to the next process, and 5 are closing WIP. So don't have any scrap, zero. However, it was expected to have 2,000 units of normal scrap, which would have sold at 2 rupee per unit. So here we go by standard, uniform. So what should have happened? 2,000 units at the rate of 2, 4,000 should have been recovered from sale of scrap. So the material cost is only 48,000. What is the equivalent units of material? 16,000. So what is the cost per unit? This is your statement of evaluation. Cost per unit for each element. Okay. 48,000 divided by 16,000. 3 rupee per unit. What is the second cost? Labor. Element is labor. What is the total cost? 14,000. Clearly mentioned. How many equivalent units? 14,000. So what is the cost per unit for labor? 1 rupee. So every time labor is employed, it will cost us 1 rupee per unit. Right. Right, Anil. So first step is statement of equivalent units. Second is statement of cost per unit for each element of cost. So what is the cost of material? 52, 4,000 is realized. So total cost of material is 48,000, which is to be divided in 16,000 equivalent units of material. So the cost per unit is 3. Labor cost 14,000. Equivalent units of labor 14,000. So the cost is 1 rupee per unit. Third, overheads. The third element is overheads. What is the total cost of overheads? 28,000 in this question. How many equivalent units of overheads? This is also 14,000. So cost per unit for each element of overheads employed, 2 rupee per unit. So this is your second statement, very, very relevant. Okay. Now basis this, 3 rupee is the material cost, 1 rupee is the labor cost, and 2 rupee is the overheads cost. On this basis, you will allocate this cost to the opening WIP, introduced and complete, closing WIP, and abnormal gain. What do you think would be the cost of closing WIP, for example, here? So closing WIP, if I want to calculate the cost of closing WIP, what will be the cost? 4,500 of units of material into 3 plus 1,500 units, equivalent units of labor, which is costing 1 rupee per unit, plus 1,500 equivalent units of overheads, which is costing 2 rupee per unit, right? Think about it. Simply pick up 4,500 from here and equivalent unit rate from here, 3 rupee per unit. So 4,500 into 3 plus 1,500 into 1 plus 1,500 into 2. So it will cost you 10,000, 13,500 plus 1,500 plus 3,000. So closing WIP will appear in the process account as 18,000 rupees. Normal loss will appear in the process account at 0. However, it has realized at the rate of 2 rupee per unit, right? Scrap value. So 4,000 will appear in the normal account. Opening WIP. How much efforts did you require to complete opening WIP? Material wise, 0 into 3. Labor wise, 1000 into 1. And overheads, 1000 into 2. So your opening WIP, which was already to some extent complete, you have further incurred 3000 rupees in completing that. 13500 introduced and completed. So this will be 13500 into 3, 13500 into 1, 13500 into 2. So I can take 13500 common, 3 plus 1 plus 2, so 6 rupee per unit. Finished goods will cost you 81,000. So this way you will calculate the cost of abnormal gain, closing WIP, introduced and completed, how much cost it takes to complete the opening WIP, and normal loss, everything. So if here I have to prepare the statement. So whatever I have shown you quickly, we can prepare this statement of allocation of cost. This is your third statement. How do we prepare it? Particulars is opening WIP, units 1500, equivalent units for each element, material 0, labor 1000, overheads 1000. Cost per unit for each element into 3 into 1 into 2. So the cost of opening work in progress, it's 3000. Closing WIP 5000. Material, labor, overheads 4500 and 1500 each, into 3 into 2 into 1. This becomes 13500, 3000 into 1 and into 2. So the closing stock cost becomes 18,000. Normal loss cost becomes simply 0 here. Finished goods cost becomes 13,500. I can combine 13,500 into 6, 81,000. Then there is abnormal gain, which is again 2,000 units. And 2,000 can also be combined into 6 because 100% complete as far as material, labor, overhead. So 3 plus 1 plus 2, 6, 12,000. Right? So you have found out the cost of each and everything. What is opening of WIP costing to complete now? 3,000. What is closing value of closing WIP? 18,000. Normal loss as such value is 0. Finished goods 81,000 and abnormal gain 12,000. Right? . So we can next prepare the process accounts, just like we have done it so far. So we had opening WIP, 1500 units, material introduced in the process, 18,500 units, costing 52,000, labor costing 14,000, overheads costing 28,000. By normal loss, 2,000, which was sold for 4,000. By transfer to next process, I'll come on to that. By closing WIP, 5,000 units, costing 18,000. And there was abnormal gain, 2,000 units, costing 12,000. Transfer to next process were 15,000 units. You would also have opening value of opening WIP, 15,000. Okay, this is very important. You can take the total of the debit side. 15,000 plus 52,000 plus 14,000 plus 28,000 plus 12,000. So this comes out to be 1,21,000. So transfer to next process should be also the balancing figure. Let's say minus 22,000. Anything that we are missing? No, I guess. So it should be 99,000. Let's see how it is 99,000. You have seen in the previous process, finished goods was prepared using a cost of 13,500 units was costing 81,000. And then opening WIP was taking 1,500 units was taking a cost of 3,000, right? We just prepared this state. Opening WIP was costing us to complete 3,000 and finished goods was costing 81,000. So these 1,500 units and these 13,500 units are moving to the next process. So their cost is also going to the next process, 81 plus 3, 84. However, opening WIP, 3,000 you incurred this in this period, but it already had a cost of 15,000. So when you will add this should total to 99. Does it? Yes. That means whatever you've done is perfectly correct. So this is how you prepare the process account. You can also verify what should be the cost of transferred units. It should be this plus the cost of opening WIP. Don't forget to add this 15,000 here. So already in the last period, you had incurred 15,000 plus you took another 3,000 to complete this. So these 1,500 units are now costing 18,000 and the remaining 13,500 cost is 81,000 this period. Scrap is not deducted from labor and overheads. It will not be deducted twice or thrice. It is to be deducted only once. So because the scrap is of units, we assume it to deduct it from material only. You can also deduct it from anything else also. Your final answer will tally, but your cost per unit will change. And similarly, but your final answer will be okay. So that would be your assumption that the scrap realized from normal loss was used in deducting the labor cost or the overheads cost. But preferably, it is always from the material. Okay. So this is your statement of, so you prepare statement of equivalent units, statement of cost per unit for each element of cost, statement of allocation of total cost to closing WIP, normal loss, abnormal loss, finished goods, opening now complete, and finally you prepare the process account. Right. I'm sorry to have extended a little bit of time. So we can call it a day. Thank you so much. If you have any queries, please paste it in the chat window. Right. Thank you so much. Bye. Yes, Manishi, done. Thank you. Good day, everyone. Good day to you too. Thank you.